bonus episode, a breaking news, an emergency podcast, however you want to frame it. The Marlins have traded potentially for their starting catcher in 2024. Will he be starting? What does it mean for Nick Fortes? Will Nick Fortes remain with the organization? Are the Marlins done at catcher? Tons to get into. This is Locked On Marlins.
You are Locked On Marlins, your daily podcast on the Miami Marlins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings from England and welcome to Locked On Marlins. Again, this is your daily Marlins podcast. I'm your host, Peter Pratt. Hit me up, of course, on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Miami Marlins _UK. If you are listening to the pod, of course, hit subscribe. It's your team every day. And thanks for making Locked On Marlins your first or second listen of the day. There is a YouTube channel as well, guys. Hit subscribe over there too. That is also called Locked On Marlins. And I am delighted to welcome back, kind of back, but definitely back for episode 2 this week, the UK GOAT, Shaun Barrett. Shaun, welcome back, brother. How are we doing?
Yeah, I'm doing good, Pete. Nothing better than 2 pods in a day.
You know it.
Banging them out, mate.
You know it. For those listening in and thinking, Pete sounds kind of hyper, I just want to call out that I've been taking these quite strong pills, I would say, for this cold. And I've had a Brewdog Punk IPA during episode 1. And I feel like it's starting to kick in quite significantly. And I've still got half left. So take that as you will. Nevertheless, guys, I hope you enjoyed the previous discussion. If you're on YouTube, you've got the rundown to help you. We talked a lot about Ohtani. We talked a lot about Juan Soto. The big news in baseball. We talked about journalism too, which had to be called out. Some of those guys came off more like fans with podcasts, in my opinion. Nevertheless, it's time to talk about the big trade that dropped. And we're going to dig into that. Not only the trade, but equally the collateral damage, perhaps, in terms of Nick Fortes and what it could mean at the catcher spot in general. So let's kind of start with the trade itself. The Marlins have acquired Christian Bethancourt, Esquire II, potentially. I don't know. That's not the full title, but it should be. Definitely sounds like a Downton Abbey character. And they have acquired him from the Cleveland Guardians. No players went to the Cleveland Guardians, just cash considerations. Cold, hard cash from the Marlins. Bethancourt was claimed on waivers relatively recently from the Rays. And so, surprise, surprise, Peter Bendix has swung a trade, having sent no players to the other organization for a former Ray. Surprise, surprise on that one. The interesting part here for me, this is what stands out, and there's a few things that stand out, but when you look at the contract situation, and we'll start here, Shaun, he's in arbitration at this point. He's in ARB 2, approaching ARB 2. It's not yet settled, but the estimated value is over $2 million. That really stands out to me. When you see this deal dropping, Shaun, this to me is saying that Christian Bethancourt, this isn't just a depth piece. $2 million plus. This guy is going to be on the roster, and the question is going to be, how much playing time does he get? So, will Christian Bethancourt be the starting catcher for the Marlins in 24?
It's really interesting, isn't it? Because, I mean, it kind of looks like it, doesn't it? I mean, we just talked yesterday about a $700 million contract, and here we are talking about a 2-year arbitration. That sounds sizable, but that's the local Marlins fan.
It is, baby.
Yeah, the Marlins aren't going to pay $2 million for a catcher and then not play him. He's going to be, if it's 50-50, you can't play. Well, not many catchers can play the bulk of a season. It's usually a tandem. So he's going to be part of a catching tandem, and I don't see the Marlins going out there and picking up one of the top fruit. Not that there are many, or that they're very good anyway. But there are a few interesting free agent catchers out there that you thought the Marlins might take a nibble at, but obviously I don't see that happening now. I think they'll just bring in a catcher that's going to be on a minor league deal with a major league contract attached to it, maybe, if they make the roster. And it will be 3 guys fighting for 2 roles. And if Fortes loses out, then he'll go down and into AAA. And if the free agent that they sign doesn't do the job in spring, then he'll be released. Or if he accepts a minor league option. So, yeah, I think in a way, Bethancourt is basically the de facto catcher being kept on the roster going into the season. And they'll have every opportunity to play the bulk of the time, if not 40% of the time.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the situation, right? Where Bethancourt's going to be... I mean, let's look back at his body of work here with the Rays. I think that's always like a good indicator. And you think, what did he put up last year? He played in 104 games last year for the Rays. 332 plate appearances. So, a good body of work there. That's the most I think that he's had in his career thus far, just about. So, it was the most playing time he received. He was DFA'd by the Rays for whatever reason. Probably roster issues, as they always seem to have, because they've got too much talent. The Guardians pick him up, and thus the Guardians go and sign, I think, Austin Hedges instead. So that's the kind of trickle down here is Austin Hedges then signed for like $4 million. So Bethancourt all of a sudden, well, he's too expensive as a backup. Let's move him on. The Marlins, I don't know what they send in terms of cash, but let's assume it's like a relatively low sum, which it probably will be. Like the Guardians are probably just happy just to move the money at this point. Like the money says to me that Bethancourt will probably expect he's going to have a similar role to what he had at the Rays of like 100 games, I would say. And so I think at this point, he's likely to be the starter and get maybe 60. He's going to get the Jacob Stallings 2022 body of work, maybe. I think that's maybe what we'll see with this guy. With that being said, Shaun, what value? I mean, we've mentioned Stallings. He regressed in every facet of his game. So with that, thinking about Bethancourt, what's the value proposition here? What are we getting from him that we didn't get from Stallings? And I mean, we should be able to list off a ton of things, but I fear the list may not be that long, which I think is interesting as well. But primarily, like, what's the main benefit? What's the main value he's going to bring to this roster?
Well, you said one of the podcasts we did recently, prepared to be underwhelmed with what the Marlins do at catcher.
I did say that.
I think prepared to be underwhelmed should be like the welcome banner to any new Marlins fan. Like it's difficult because when you're talking about a catcher that's been DFA'd and had to go to Korea to play some baseball, like we know that the numbers aren't going to be great. And there was one number and only one number, unfortunately, that he is good at, and that is controlling the running game. Which, with the new rules, with the way that ran rampant last year, it's a valuable skill to have. And I think we spoke before about when you're a Marlin, or the Rays way of baseball is finding those talents, those skills that are maybe undervalued. So maybe that's what they're looking at. They're looking at this one tool will actually help us out in many ways. But there's a bit of pop there as well. His actual numbers, and if you look at his baseball savant numbers, they're all pretty blue and disappointing. But if you look back at 2022, there's a little bit more in the sort of exit velocity, barrel, slugging, hard hit. So he's got a bit of power to him, which is valuable for the Marlins because they play in a cavernous park. So maybe if he can rekindle those numbers, he actually had a 100 WRC plus in 2022 as well. So when you're talking about league average hitting from a catcher, you're talking about an above average hitting catcher because catching is probably closer to 85 for average. So I think that there was enough talent and enough tools there for the Marlins to find some value. I think he'll almost certainly recoup the financial value that they've paid, going to be paying him. And I think you're right as far as the cash considerations. It might be one of those situations where it's literally $1 to make an actual transaction. Like when we used to see football teams back in the 90s be sold for £1 because you're taking on so much debt. That's kind of what this trade is. We'll give you $1 and we'll take on this $2 million that you don't really want to have to pay.
Yeah, it feels like it, doesn't it? It feels like when we saw the deal was happening, and a lot of people thinking, okay, he's just been claimed off waivers. The Guardians haven't got a ton of attachment to him. They've just signed someone else. Like, surely they can't be sending much the other way. And then you see cash and you think, well, it is the Marlins. So this probably like higher, lower than $2. I'd be hitting the under, I think, on the $2 or $1.50 number. But yeah, I think the funny thing, what you've called out is what stands out. It's what we've all focused on with Bethancourt, really, is he has one skill. He is a one-tool dude. Granted, he hit more home runs, I think, combined than Nick Fortes and Jacob Stallings last year. And so actually, there's maybe some offensive upgrade too, but the skill you call out is controlling the running game. And I must say, it was dire last season. So I am all for the Marlins seeing a clear deficiency in their defensive game and addressing it specifically with a guy that is top 5 in Major League Baseball at this position, at that role. So I'm all for that. So on the face of it, I think they've got miles better at that aspect. Granted, the other catching skills, which Nick Fortes is highly efficient in particularly blocking, that element, less so maybe framing, but like some of the other catching elements defensively, like Nick Fortes has really improved at, which has been great to see. If you could merge these two actually as a defensive pair, it'd be an absolutely stunning defensive catcher. And there's like a bit of pop in Bethancourt. And for me, there's some untapped potential in Nick Fortes. I still believe there's some untapped offensive potential. So we're going to dig into that because for me, I'm really interested to see, particularly off the back of Peter Bendix out there saying, we're going to sign multiple catchers, multiple guys. They've signed Bethancourt and they're going to pay him over $2 million. That says to me he's on the roster. What's this mean for Nick Fortes? What untapped potential is there with Nick Fortes? Tons to get into. But before we do that, this episode is brought to you by our good friends over at FanDuel. Yes, sir. And you can score early this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app, well, it is super easy to use, and it has all of the betting options you need, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, guys, you're here with me, Peter Pratt, and the UK GOAT, Shaun Barrett. On Tuesday's episode of Locked On Marlins, we are carrying on the conversation. The Marlins have traded for a catcher, Christian Bethancourt, acquired for a small sum, we believe, a small financial sum from the Cleveland Guardians. The expectation is that he will be paid over $2 million by the Marlins in 2024, and thus we are making the connection and the assumption he will have a ton of playing time. The question now, Shaun, is what happens with Nick Fortes, and what are you seeing with Fortes? From my assessment, it was the defense improved significantly, where he was a better defensive catcher than Jacob Stallings in 23. The offense, however, after a hot start in like 2021 and a bit of 22, like 2023, the numbers were seriously underwhelming from Nick Fortes. And so like the defense went up, the offense went down. Is there a big league catcher in Nick Fortes, in your opinion?
I think there is, simply because of that defense growth that he showed last year. Like, there are certain value metrics for defense that have him top 15 in the league. And you're right. It's a yin and yang situation between him and Bethancourt. His framing is very good. Fortes, that is, and its pop time is really bad. So it would be really interesting to get those two into a room together and have the slightly younger, because Fortes is now no longer young. 27 for a major league catcher is still pretty young, to be fair, and pretty raw because it takes time to develop. But yeah, any little sort of motions, tips, or anything like that he can use to improve his pop time, control that running game a little bit better, is only going to grow him. But you're absolutely right. It's the offense that really fell apart last year. And it's hard to keep a player on the roster, isn't it? The defense is what saved him, and the fact that the Marlins lacked anything in competition for that. So I think it is a case of we're going to go into spring with 3, maybe 4 catchers that genuinely are coming in to fight for a position on the roster, not just depth field, because obviously you bring several catchers into a spring training simply just to catch bullpens. So there's going to be 3 or 4 catchers, I think, that come in looking for a job, and Fortes is kind of at a default position of being a bit lower because he has options. They can just send him down to AAA and keep him there and develop him there. But no, I think realistically the defense probably gives them a good chance. It's just that the hitting needs to improve, and we'll go from there, I guess.
Yeah, it's a really good point. Nick Fortes, 2 minor league option seasons remain. So, they have the versatility and the flexibility with Nick Fortes. The question I think that we, as a collective, not just me and you on this podcast, Shaun, but the people listening in, Marlins fans at this point, the question we have to be asking ourselves is, what do we want from this role? And what can we legitimately expect from this spot? And I personally think, based on the current situation, and it's hard because we had JT Realmuto for a number of years, and we saw what really good looks like up close and personal. The best catcher in baseball in many ways. So we were spoiled with that. And I think it's important to just recalibrate on that and understand what we're working with. And really, for me, the priority remains with this catching spot is just defense. And I would say modern defense. And I think that's where they've gone. I think that's where Peter Bendix has gone with this. Is with these rule changes, you have to be able to control the running game. Because if you can't, these teams are going to run all over it, and there's going to be nothing you can do to stop it. And I think that's been a clear deficiency, and they've gone out and they've addressed it. And I think, to be honest, they've addressed it in such a low-cost way. I think they should be applauded for that. I think this is a really low-key, sneaky good move. And I know he's not going to fix up the stats with his offense, but again, all the guys out there, no matter who they sign, who they traded for, all of them you'd look at and go, the offense ain't going to be great. That was just going to be the situation. Prepare to be underwhelmed. But I really like what they've done here. It's tough to get really excited about a one-tool dude, Shaun, that you've called out, but I'm kind of excited because of how frustrated I remember being in 2023 watching the Marlins, just their inability to stop anything from first base to second base over and over and over again. And for me, this feels like a win. It feels like a win. I also feel like, to your point, the combination, the fusion in the catcher's room of Bethancourt and Fortes and whoever else they bring in, and there's going to be a few others that are going to fight for jobs and probably end up at AAA, in my opinion. I think they will end up with Bethancourt and Fortes as a starting 2. But if they can get Fortes to up his game even more defensively, he's then an ultra cost-controlled dude that has some upside offensively. There's Nick Fortes. There is a step up that could be made. Could be. It's all hypothetical, much like prospects, but I love the fact they brought in a guy who's proven it, can help Fortes. Fortes can help him. And overall, the Marlins, I think, have got better with this move, Shaun. And it's the ultra low cost. This feels like such a Rays move, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's one of those moves where, on the face of it, you don't get too excited. Like this was one of those moves that I sort of, when I first looked at it, I was like, I couldn't. It didn't translate. I couldn't work out why they do that.
Yeah.
But the more and more I thought about it, the more I looked through the stats. Like I think, it's sort of like one of those diamond in the rough. I keep expectations low. we're not going to suddenly have a top 5 catcher on our hands.
No.
But when you're talking about value, when you're talking about trying to make the team better, and I think for fans visually, it'll be a much better product as well. Because as you said, like there's nothing worse than watching guys get on base and then just run around the bases. I think it is a case of the team will look tighter, the games will look better, which ultimately as fans is kind of what you want. And you're looking at the stats, it's never going to be that warm and fuzzy, but actual game watching, strategy is going to be better. And I think, obviously Bendix has grown up quite literally in the Rays organization. So he'll know a thing or two about doing this kind of stuff. So, I think this is one of those moves that in 6 months' time he could look really, really good. Obviously,
agreed.
It's one of many that's required, because this alone isn't a move. This is not an Ohtani move that suddenly makes your team significantly better. But it's a death by 1,000 needles.
Love it. I love that. Talk to me about Peter Bendix then. Anyway, when is he going to step out of his comfort zone here, Shaun? Because right now, all we've seen is Peter Bendix just working with what he knows and working with players that he knows, working with an organization that he knows in dealing. When is he going to step out of his comfort zone? And which organization is he going to drop a deal with? Like, if there's going to be a deal to be done that's an Arias, Pablo Lopez type of deal that Kim Ang dropped, and I believe, we lean into Craig Mish for obvious reasons. And, you read between the lines with Craig, he's kind of telling you what's going to happen. It's going to be like some low-key free agents, no big splashes, but there could be something via trade. And if there is to be something via trade, which organization do you think is going to be the one that Peter Bendix takes the training wheels fully off on?
I think fully off, actually, I'd say he doesn't do it. I think he'll probably do it with a team from the AL East.
Yeah, I was thinking that too.
A group. This would be the next logical step as far as teams that he has scouted significantly. And obviously we know the Yankees seemingly are all in. They seemingly need pitching, and they've got some very good prospects. I think that could be an opportunity there.
I'm with you, mate. I thought exactly the same. Like, the next best outside of the Rays, you kind of start to mushroom it, and you then think, okay, AL East then. What's going on? And frankly, I think the Yankees are interesting. I also think the Blue Jays are interesting too. And I really do. And I, to be honest with you, I'm really intrigued about Bo Bichette. I spent a bit of time looking at Bo Bichette a few days ago. He doesn't quite have the length of control maybe you would ideally want. But there could be a similar deal with a Pablo Arias where you go and get Bo Bichette and you know what you're getting. And you just plumb the dude in at shortstop and you go, great, let's roll. It just de-risks it. I saw Isaac Azut talking about a deal with the Yankees, thinking about Volpe. And I know where Isaac's going with that. And I could see maybe the Marlins doing that. It wouldn't be a Kim Ang deal. I'm interested to see, is that a Peter Bendix deal? Because Kim Ang was more about the now. And that's what I loved about the Reyes deal. It was fully de-risked. There was no risk in that for the Marlins. You knew who Luis Arias was. If the Marlins go and trade for Anthony Volpe, many people will turn to that and say, well, he has the potential to. He could be. There's so much of that in there. Right now, Anthony Volpe's hit a ton of bombs in his rookie year. He didn't really hit great. His defense was patchy. big prospect name that could be great. It's got multiple years of control. Kind of fits the brief. There's risk in that. There is risk in that, particularly if you have to move someone of serious note, which you will do. Maybe multiple guys of note. And so I am really intrigued to see when Peter Bendix takes off the training wheels, when it is not a Rays-connected deal, where he's like, let's go. The interesting part, Shaun, is do we think that happens this offseason? I feel like you feel like it maybe isn't this offseason that Peter Bendix goes like with one of those all-in types of deals, maybe.
Yeah, I think with the way the season, this upcoming season is panning out with no Sandy and question marks on whether, like, will they be competitive? I hope they are. I think there's some bounces of the ball that they're going to require to do so. But if you look at this year as a quasi-lost year, a rebuild year, a growth year, I think it would be challenging to make that sort of move. I would prefer Bendix to spend a year with the organization, really get a firm understanding of who the team are, what's in the organization before making a move like that. I think Bichette is challenging with the length of control.
It is.
You're literally that kind of move, that kind of all-in move. Because in my mind, that's what it would be. You're looking at 2024. Maybe competing 2020 with that kind of move. 2025, the final year of that contract, paying him $17 million. You've got Arias, are they going to extend or not? Sandy's money gets more and more. This would be a pure shot at 2025 playoffs, which don't get me wrong, would be a hell of an exciting prospect. But yeah, I think more realistically would be a sort of Volpe deal where they know that they're stretching out that competitive window. But yeah, all in baseball is always, of course, super fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is it. We've kind of become used to Kim Ang's MO. And Kim Ang, when she was in and buying, she bought well. I have to say, like from a trade perspective, her trades for the win now, I don't think you can knock any of them, frankly. And I'm just so intrigued to see the way things shift with Peter Bendix. And they do have to shift because the reason it's shifting as we go back to it is it isn't all about just the major league roster. Like there's no depth, there's no farm. And so things kind of have to change. And we know that. And so it kind of takes you away maybe from an all-in deal for Bo Bichette and 2 years of control, of quite expensive control in many ways for the Marlins. But I do, I'm with you though, Shaun, that like the AL East is definitely the division to watch, I would say, from a Marlins trade perspective. It's a hyper competitive division too. We obviously saw the Blue Jays. We assumed the Blue Jays were like heavily in on Ohtani. It wasn't just all fake news. And so like the Blue Jays have got money to spend. They've got some extensions maybe to make. The Rays are still obviously super competitive there. The Yankees are in all, an all-in situation. The Orioles are looking sexy, but, really cost-controlled. So, one hell of a division there, I must say. So we'll wait to see. I think in summary, though, sneaky good deal, this Bethancourt deal for the Marlins specifically and what they're trying to do. They've addressed a clear deficiency, which was throwing runners out at second. It was just so turgid. So we'll see. But for me, with the money and the 2 years of control with Bethancourt, you'll get at least 50% of the time. And I think actually his presence will help Fortes. And Fortes ideally takes another step up in his game. Looking forward. We're going to call it a day. I appreciate the UK GOAT Shaun Barrett for hopping on a double header, a Monday double header, but this will be kind of released almost on Tuesday. So a kind of bang situation from the UK GOAT Shaun Barrett. I appreciate everyone for making Locked On Marlins your first listen or second listen. I hope you've taken both episodes in. Just a reminder, if you've listened to this one and you didn't listen to yesterday's one, we mainly got into Shohei Ohtani and all of the journalistic elements associated with that and what it means for the Dodgers, equally Juan Soto to the Yankees, and a bit of Giancarlo Stanton sprinkled in there. We'll look forward to seeing you through the week. I am back on full rotation now. I am back to 85%, maybe even touching 90% health. I look forward to seeing you guys real soon.